So a few days ago, I released a video regarding the existence of left-wing authoritarianism and horseshoe theory. A large part of that discussion needed to involve the long history and academic debate regarding the Frankfurt School alum Theodor Adorno and his fascism scale, which intended to seek out fascists wherever they may be. Voting Republican? Fascist. Drinking milk? Fascist. Smiling? Oh, definitely fascist. If you have wondered where that social tendency to label everyone to the right of Marx as fascistic comes from, you need look no further than to the F scale. And while the F scale has been abandoned due to simply lacking any kind of validity, well, mostly abandoned outside of discussions regarding it, usually in the more critical, cultural regions of scholarship, in its place, to this day, most researchers trying to isolate personality differences between the left and the right will use an instrument that is based on the F scale, the right-wing authoritarianism instrument developed by Bob Altmaier. Like its predecessor, it was criticized by several social scientists as having the same problems of validity. One of the staunchest critics of Altmaier's authoritarian scale and Adorno's F scale was, and still is, Dr. John J. Ray. His research pointed out various flaws in this instrument and the F scale upon which it was based, and resulted in an ongoing back and forth between Altmaier's various books on authoritarianism, for which, I should point out, Altmaier was awarded the American Association for Advancement of Science Prize for Behavioral Science Research, despite the many criticisms of his work. And while to this day, masters and doc students are usually taught to use the RWA scale because it's a good measure of authoritarianism, Dr. Ray contended early on that RWA, being based on the F scale, was little more than another measure of conservatism, that it lacked validity because it wasn't looking at what it claimed to be looking at. His own book included extensive critique on the F scale, Conservatism as Heresy, published in 1974. But let's cut out the rest of the history lesson on this debate that's back and forth, because I made a 45-minute video that explains the whole history of it, and you can check that out if you would like to know more.
Would you like to know more?
But I didn't really introduce Dr. Ray individually, given the large scale of that video, so let me first give you a little bit more background behind the man. Dr. Ray was born in 1943 in Queensland, Australia, receiving a master's degree in psychology from the University of Sydney in 1969, and a doctoral degree in behavioral sciences from Macquarie University in 1974. Despite retiring officially from academia in 1983, Dr. Ray has published more than 250 academic articles and writings on a wide variety of topics, but with an emphasis on psychological authoritarianism, conservatism, racism, and achievement motivation. While I was working on editing that video, I happened across a few of Dr. Ray's websites and blogs, which he actually updates very frequently. To say that I was pleasantly surprised with his writings that I pored over is an understatement. The brief autobiography that he provides at the top of several of his pages will quickly, or actually not so quickly and not so brief as it is rather long, may make it clear to you why I was so happy to read this. And so while I could have cut his autobiography up, I think I'd like to read it to you in full so you can get an idea of who this man is, Dr. John J. Ray. He introduces himself as such: former member of the Australia-Soviet Friendship Society, former anarcho-capitalist, and former member of the British Conservative Party, and now a quote deplorable. When it comes to political incorrectness, I hit the trifecta. I talk about race, IQ, and social class. I have an academic background in all three subjects, but that wins me no forgiveness. The fundamental aims of the leftist party is to disrupt the lives of their fellow citizens, whom they regard as complacent, as much as possible. At its most basic psychological level, conservatives are the contented people, and leftists are the discontented people, and both are largely dispositional, inborn, which is why they so rarely change. As a good academic, I must first define my terms. A leftist is a person who is so dissatisfied with the way things naturally are that he or she is prepared to use force to make people behave in ways that otherwise they would not. So an essential feature of leftism is that they think they have the right to tell other people what to do. Leftists are the disgruntled folk. They see things in the world that are not ideal and conclude, therefore, that they have the right to change those things by force. Conservative explanations of why things are not ideal, and never can be, fall on deaf ears. Oh gee, I feel like we're going back to that just world hypothesis now, aren't we? Sorry, don't mean to interject. Leftists aim to deliver dismay and disruption onto other people's lives, and they are good at achieving that. Leftists are wolves in sheep's clothing. Liberals are people who do not believe in liberty. Because they claim to have all the answers on society's ills, communists often seem cool to young people. I'll interject again, I certainly felt that way for a year or two. German has a word that describes most leftists well: scheinheilig, a person who appears to be very kind, soft-natured, and filled with pure goodness, but behind the facade has a vile nature. He is seemingly holy, but is an unscrupulous person on the inside.
The Jews taught me this great word, schmuck. I was a schmuck, and now Not a schmuck.
The new faith is very oppressive. Leftist orthodoxy is the new dominant religion of the Western world, and it is every bit as bigoted and oppressive as Christianity was at its worst. There are two varieties of authoritarian leftism. Fascists are soft leftists, preaching one big happy family, better together, in other words, and communists are hard leftists, preaching class war. Equality, the nonsensical and incoherent claim that underlies so much of leftist discourse is, quote, all men are equal, and that is the envier's gospel. It makes not a scrap of sense and shows no contact with reality, but is something that enviers resort to as a way of soothing their envious feelings. They deny the very differences that give them so much heartburn. Denial was long ago identified by Freud as a maladaptive psychological defense mechanism, and all men are equal is a prize example of that. Whatever one thinks of his theories, Freud was undoubtedly an accurate observer of people, and very few psychologists today would doubt the maladaptive nature of denial as described by Freud. Socialism is the most evil malady to ever afflict the human brain.
That was beautiful.
The death toll in World War II alone tells you that. The standard response from Marxist apologists for Stalin and other communist dictators is to say, you can't make an omelet without breaking eggs. To which Orwell retorted, where's the omelet? You do still occasionally see some mention of the old idea that leftist parties represent the worker. In the case of US Democrats, that is long gone. Now they want to reform the worker. No wonder most working class Americans these days vote Republican. Democrats are the party of the minorities and the smug.
I must have slipped. Wayne, what do you do if every time you see this one incredible
social scientist,
you think you're gonna hurl?
Yep, you may see now why I instantly thought Dr. Ray was a pretty cool guy who doesn't afraid of commies. I thoroughly enjoyed reading his thoughts throughout his blog and website, and I reached out to him asking if he'd be willing to conduct a short interview with me. He was kind enough to answer 12 questions, 6 from you, the viewers, and 6 from myself, regarding his work, and today, I come to you with the answers to those questions. Dr. Ray explained to me that an audio interview would be difficult for him, so I asked a friend if he would help me out to provide a voice for the good doctor, and I could think of no Aussie with a better, smoother set of vocal cords than Suit Yourself. A real swell cunt. Oh, oof, that's right, sorry, can't say that word. That right there is why it's illegal to be Australian on YouTube. Or so you might believe, considering how many times this platform has screwed over people like Suit Yourself. Freaking discrimination, I'm telling you. His original channel was completely nuked, but he's back, and making some really funny videos, so please, in addition to checking out Dr. Ray's website and links that are below, be sure to subscribe to Suit Yourself's new channel, or newer channel I guess, here on a card and in the description. Suit would probably have over 100,000 subs by now if it had not been for YouTube's censorious tomfoolery. So, do your part today in giving a perpetual middle finger to old Susie by subscribing.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part.
I'm doing my part too.
And with that, let's get on to the interview. Why is everyone focused only on right-wing extremism, which is bad, but nothing is said of left-wing extremism, like communism, which has been far, far worse? In fact, you could walk down the street with a hammer and sickle on your shirt and get next to zero complaints. But if you so much as look like a skinhead, you're a Nazi that needs to be punched in the face.
Mainly because communists appear to be on the side of everyone, whilst the Nazis did not. People often judge by intentions rather than deeds.
How successful could this, referring to the left-wing authoritarian instrument, right-wing authoritarian instrument, and F-scale, be in predicting the likelihood of authoritarian fascist takeovers in a given society? Could we say for sure that X country is at, quote, high risk of fascistic coup, and Y country is at low risk?
The RWA scale is politically irrelevant. It is not valid at measuring anything conservative or leftist.
Does a person's authoritarianism score change over time?
Yes. The young tend to be very authoritarian lefties, but move right with age.
Do you believe that political pseudoscience is being created using the guise of social science?
90% of social science is pseudoscience.
Well, I can't argue there. Fascists were left economically, so their attachment to the right is based on traditionalism. How does this view of social conservatism square with the fact that they were massive historical revisionists and created fantasies about culture to hold up as tradition?
They were just fantasists, as lefties usually are.
Why is fascism right-wing? It was invented and made popular by a lifelong commie, Mussolini, and National Socialism came from the German Workers' Party. Hitler was portrayed as a new Lenin. They all hated traditionalism and monarchy and believed in the new man, end of history idea.
In its day, fascism was wholly leftist, but some of their ideas sound conservative in modern times.
I hope that Dr. Ray provided some adequate responses to your guys' questions. I thoroughly enjoyed them. And now, on to my own. Having read much of your research, you have made clear your concerns with Adorno's F scale and further with Altmaier's right-wing authoritarianism scale. Do you believe that the continual use of the RWA in modern research is a disservice to the considerable research which provided evidence as to its faults? And if so, do you believe there are political motivations behind this trend?
All the research with the RWA tells us nothing, as the RWA is not valid.
Well, related slightly to the previous question, do you believe your research and that of others such as Eysenck, which question the F-scale and propose alternative hypotheses, have been effectively buried in the annals of research? And if so, is there a political rationale behind that? We often hear about right-wing authoritarianism, but we almost never hear about such a tendency from the left-leaning side.
Social science is thoroughly left-dominated, so anything contrary to leftism will be ignored.
I see. Well, perhaps most importantly, could you define left-wing authoritarianism for us? Is it identical to right-wing authoritarianism, similar, or dissimilar? Does it even exist based on your empirical analyses, or has the last 50 years of research been an exercise in futility and speculation rather than actual academic rigor?
All leftism is authoritarianism. Telling others what to do is the whole of their program.
Well, that's that. Relatedly, you have stated that both fascism and communism are generally left-leaning in nature. We can surmise that these are generally authoritarian positions, but what defines a right-leaning authoritarian? And could you describe what differentiates him or her from a left-leaning authoritarian?
There are no right-leaning conservatives. Conservatives are generally libertarian. Righteous marchers are just anti-leftists.
Well dang, I guess we've been sort of off the mark then, haven't we? On a slightly more personal note, did you ever feel excluded or ostracized from academia given your more conservative stances on politics and your criticism of the F-scale and right-wing authoritarianism instrument? Do you believe the academy in general has a political leaning?
I had a lot of trouble getting my work published, and in the end, it was ignored.
Again, I can't argue there. And finally, from me, do you have any advice for young people who may be interested in academia and how to navigate the tense current political climate in contrast to his or her interests in scientific accuracy?
A conservative in academia is 99% likely to be doomed. Go into real estate instead. I did.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, that last one didn't hit close to home at all or anything. 'Tis only a flesh wound to my sense of hope, not anything that matters or anything. My life's a sham. I should go into real estate.
Be comforted that in the face of all aridity and disillusionment, and despite the changing fortunes of time, there is always a big future in computer maintenance.
Guys, I can't lie. I thought those were some serious, interesting words of wisdom, and he was concise and succinct to boot, something I obviously struggle with. But I was so happy to have an opportunity to talk to Dr. Ray, and if you think he's as neat of a guy as I clearly do, again, I have linked to several of his websites below, and for those of my audience, I would think most of you probably would get the most enjoyment out of his blog Dissecting Leftism, a blog which updates almost every day, so there's plenty of content there for you to check out. This was really fun to do, and I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I did. Once again, also please consider going over to Suit Yourself's channel, who lent his excellent voice to this video. And again, if you did enjoy, please consider liking the video and subscribing to my channel. I'm Aiden Paladin, Alton of Old.
America was founded on liberty and independence, and not government coercion, domination, and control. We are born free, and we will stay free.